Okay, thank you, Gail, for joining us today. I am going to read aloud the rules for this vetting committee that we're going to be doing today. These simple rules: no one is allowed to be in the room except the vetting panel and the candidate. All electronics allowed in the room shall be turned off except laptops used by the vetting committee and the video recorders provided by the vetting committee. Cell phones or voice recorders shall be turned off in the room. No written material or notes will be taken by the candidate. North Texas Council vetting panel members and candidate agree that all questions and responses at this vetting session are to remain confidential property until videos are uploaded and considered public information on the North Texas Council website and/or an alternate website. Verbal questions will be asked today, and verbal responses to those questions will be given with 1 or 2 minute responses for each question. The candidate will receive a copy of her vetting interview recording, upon which time the video is posted on the North Texas Council website or an alternate website. And we want to thank you for joining us here today, Gail. We will now go around the table and introduce ourselves very briefly. Would you like to start?
I'm Babs Millward from Rowlett.
I'm Barbara Harless from Murphy, Texas.
Janie Britton from Garland.
And Liz Moser from Garland.
And now Gail Spurlock, we would like to thank you for coming here today and spending your precious time with us. Would you please give us about a 2-minute self-bio and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Gail Spurlock. I'm running for State Board of Education District 12. I'm a mother of 3 grown children, an IT consultant for the past, about 20 years. I'm a small business owner in that regard. My ex-husband had a home improvements company, and I was the business manager for that. I've worked probably in 50 or 60 different companies over the years, all different kinds of companies, all different kinds of people, doing problem solving, business process engineering, software development, technical writing. Oh, thank you. About 10 years ago, after 9/11, I started studying world history to see how we got where we were. That led me into studying politics, current events, and some philosophy and politics. And I've been in the Tea Party since I found the first one that I found here was up in Bedford or Grapevine in March of 2009. And I've been with the Tea Parties ever since and got more and more knowledgeable and come to the conclusion that education is the most important part of what our culture does. And our education system needs improvement. We've had some marvelous standards passed recently. They need to be protected. There is a real all-out effort right now to get either a liberal majority or enough Republican swing votes to reopen and roll back some of those standards. We had some horrible press in the newspaper belittling the work that's been done, and it really was a huge step forward. But there's people who don't want us to move forward, and we need to defeat them, and we need to get our country back on really sound grounding. This is an important position to protect the standards already passed and to ensure that the rest of the standards are just as high caliber. And that's what I'd like to do.
Thank you.
This is your first question. You have 1 minute to answer. You may have already answered it in your intro, but go ahead again. What made you decide to run for a position on the Texas State Board of Education, and what is your primary goal?
When I found out how liberal-leaning and how frequently the people who are my opponents have voted with the Democrats against against the conservative agenda, I've looked up their records, and that's why I'm running. I don't tell people that because I want you to vote for me. That's why I'm running, because the conservative standards are at risk right now.
Thank you.
Question number 2. The Senate Bill number 6, which became law at the last Texas legislative session, defines open source instructional materials as electronic instructional materials available for download at no charge to a student. With Senate Bill 6, why do you think that eligible institutions, including certain research universities and members of the American Association of Universities, are allowed to submit open source instructional materials for adoption without the State Board of Education being able to reject these materials?
Because the state board has standards. There are people who don't want that. And it's really pretty creepy. There's been a lot of, frankly, socialist indoctrination going on in our schools for a long time. And I'm not afraid to come out and say it. I've seen it, I've experienced it, and it's not good. Socialism is old, old, old. It's just tyranny with a populist face. And that is being sold to our children. And a lot of these professors, they openly profess it. We have 60-some members of Congress who are socialists, self-proclaimed socialists in the Democrat Party. So that's why they did it. And we need to object to that. We need to oppose. But you know, that's going to take parents. That's going to take individuals stepping up to the plate and getting educated. I'm stepping up to the plate here and now in this position to do my best to support you and all of the citizens of this district in taking back control of our lives, our children, and our schools. It's up to us. That's what self-government is. And if we don't want to do the work that takes, we will not have self-government and we will not be worthy of it. I'm doing my part to help, and I hope you will too.
Thank you.
You have 2 minutes to answer this question.
Mm-hmm.
With the passage of Senate Bill 6, local school districts will be given their own allotment of funds and more flexibility to purchase textbooks, open source instructional materials, and computer equipment, as well as pay for salaries and training of technology personnel, with less oversight by the State Board of Education. Do you see this as a good thing? If yes, why? If not, why not?
If the parents are closely involved, I'm fine with it. But the parents need to look at that material. Maybe I'm a little torn. The one thing is, most parents are already working, and they're raising a family, and there's only so much that they can do. They cannot read every book and examine everything. They need to get more involved, but and so I'm really torn on it. I like seeing more local control, a lot. I think that's really important. But it only works if people are involved, personally.
All right. You have 1 minute to answer this question, Gail.
Mm-hmm.
Thomas Ratliff was an active lobbyist when he ran for the State Board of Education, but this information didn't come out until after he was elected. Have you ever been a lobbyist, or do you have any other potential conflicts of interest that others might perceive as influencing your State Board of Education service? 1 minute.
I have never been a lobbyist. I have been a parent, and that does influence my service. But I think it should. I'm also very desirous of knowing what other parents think. Things are changing rapidly, and we need to all stay abreast of the changes. But as far as lobbyists, no. I intend with this position to become a bit of a lobbyist to the House of Representatives and the Texas Senate. They're pulling a few scams over on the education system, and we need to stop it.
Okay, you have 2 minutes to answer this question. Education Week, June 2010, states that Democrats and some Republicans, including Texas State Senator Kel Seliger, plan to push bills in 2013 that will rein in the SBOE, State Board of Education Authority, or abolish it altogether. This is not just a Texas issue. In Iowa, Republican Senator Brad Zahn introduced Bill 2371 to eliminate Iowa's Department of Education and the state school board. This bill moves authority to regents and councils that are unelected and unaccountable to the people. What are your thoughts on this, and what will you do to keep the authority of the elected State Board of Education?
I will make a lot of noise. The only reason the State Board of Education needs a lot of authority right now is because we are the only elected officials representing the people involved in the school system. Any effort to eliminate, if we have a Department of Education or the State Board of Education, that could probably be eliminated at some point, but not as long as there's a U.S. Department of Education. What's going on here is by eliminating that state level of control, which was the same thing they did with the 17th Amendment. Senators used to be elected by the state legislature. With general election, that's gone. The states were completely emasculated by that amendment. And we're seeing some of the effects of that now. And this is another effort to pull the same stunt once again. I'm running as an elected official representing the people. We have a little bit of expertitis in our society right now. As long as someone is an expert, you just do what they say and you don't even think about it. Well, experts sometimes are wrong, even with good intentions. We've got to stop relying upon experts and resume relying upon ourselves. And until the citizens are doing it, we must not get rid of the State Board of Education, because we are the only people who can rein in the administrators who really do want to subjugate us. They already live privileged lifestyles. They're exempt from, oh heck, they just cut all the school funding. The administrators aren't being touched. They're laying off the service providers, teachers. It's absurd. They're a protected class, and we're apparently annoying them, and that's a good thing.
Thank you.
This is question number 6. You have 2 minutes to answer this question. What 3 pieces of legislation related to education would you like to see pushed in the upcoming legislative session?
We need to repeal the state constitutional amendment that takes away the state board, that reduces the state board's control over the permanent school fund. That's part of the weakening. And I hadn't really thought about introducing new legislation yet. So that's the only one, is that I know that's a bad one. And I haven't looked closely enough to have any other things that I would like to introduce or suggest to the legislation.
You have 1 minute to answer this question. Do you believe charter schools should be allowed to promote other cultures over American culture? And do you support allowing charter schools to use the permanent school fund to guarantee construction bonds? Why or why not?
Okay, first question, I don't think that public schools should be promoting culture at all. We shouldn't even need to promote. If we need to promote our own culture, that's a problem in our society. And it's not the school's jobs to fix all the problems in society. The job of schools is to educate children. It is the job of parents, clergy, local clubs and groups, neighborhoods, to inculcate the culture. To have foreign culture promoted is definitely a no-no. It should be absolutely prohibited. Okay, and what was the second part of the question?
Do you support allowing charter schools to use the permanent school fund to guarantee construction bonds?
No. We need to get more free market, not less free market.
All right. Gail, you have 2 minutes to answer this question. During the Social Studies Curriculum Standards Review in 2009-2010, the State Board of Education voted to make changes which some consider to be controversial. Do you support the changes made or not, and why?
I absolutely support the changes made. I was on the world history team. Our history has been compromised for the past century. And I understand when people were irate and said, oh my gosh, you're rewriting history. No, we were restoring history. But there weren't enough people in the public who were well educated enough to recognize that. Those of us who dug into it, I was horrified at the false information that I had and the missing information from my own education. I didn't know, for instance, that when the Pilgrims set up their little community, well, first of all, they were required to be communist. That was in their charter. Communism is that old. It was mandatory. And as a result of that, half the people died in the first year. They opened up the Bible and said, oh, if you don't work, you don't eat. They turned it into a free market system, and they took off and flourished from there. Additionally, they had a rule where they were fined $25, and $25 was a lot more in 1642 than it is today. The parents were fined $25 if they failed to teach their children to read. And the reason was they wanted the children to be able to read the Bible for themselves so that no one could ever interpret it for them. That would be a pretty nice standard to have right now, that children can read for themselves so that no one can influence them in any subject, but that they can go and do their own research and find out for themselves.
Thank you. You have 1 minute to answer this question. Do you favor English immersion or bilingual education?
Oh, immersion, absolutely. It's statistically proven that students who are receiving bilingual education are more likely to drop out. They do poorer on all of the standardized tests, and it costs more. I can understand paying more money for a better result, but to pay more money to disable a child and inhibit their future success is really stupid. Pardon my terseness there.
Okay, question number 10. You have 2 minutes to answer this question. What part of the TEKS, Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, covers sex education? At what age level is it taught? Do you agree with it? If you don't agree with this, what would you change?
I haven't read it closely enough, so I don't know all those details. I believe it's covered in health class in the 7th and 8th grade. And that's the earliest it should be introduced. If sex education is introduced any earlier, we need to be up in arms about it. And it should be abstinence only. I would personally like to see it pretty much removed from our health standards. There's so much we need to learn about nutrition and toxins and exercise. And there's so much information about health, and there's so much junk science right now in the health industry that people just buy into because they don't know any better. Sex education should be covered as subject of reproduction in biology, and the rest of it should be addressed by parents and clergy, which is the social and moral aspects. Okay, real quickly. Society has been reproducing for thousands and thousands of years. I don't think it's something that we need to teach children in school. Even if we never say a word, they're going to figure it out. It's not that tough.
You have 2 minutes to answer this question. What is the importance of teaching the Magna Carta, U.S. Constitution, Bill of Rights, property rights, and private business ownership?
What is the purpose of teaching those things?
Importance.
Well, it's very important. It shows the so gradual inching toward freedom of civilization over the course of, 6,000 years of recorded history. And when you study that history, it is a history of tyranny of the few over the masses. And there was this tiny little sliver that grew and grew and was persistent as can be, that led ultimately to the founding of America, and why America today remains the greatest threat to the tyrants of the world, including the ones in our own government. And if our children don't learn that, they will have a very difficult time, which is what we're seeing right now. We're having a hard time getting young people interested in retaining their liberty. They've been taught that it's better to listen to experts. We need them to know that they are the experts in liberty.
You have 2 minutes to answer this question, Gail. Several North Texas superintendents representing the North Texas Regional Consortium recently sent a letter to the State Board of Education and the governor with concerns about standardized testing. In the letter, they discussed, quote, relentless test preparation and boring memorization of facts. Do you agree with the low opinion of memorization, which is sometimes called drill and kill, that is common among many educators? If yes, why? If not, why not?
I like to compare this to the subject of music. Some people are born with perfect pitch, and if you give them an instrument, they can play it. The rest of us have to practice, and we have to memorize the scales, and we have to play them over and over and over if we are ever going to be able to create a new piece of music. Now, if we just want our children to be robots, they don't need to memorize those things, because there will always be an expert to tell them what to do. If we want them to be able to think for themselves, it's imperative that they memorize those facts so well that they can create new thoughts with them. And if they never learn them to that degree, they will never create a new thought. And I think that's the objection to drill and kill. It's very, very effective. And it's a very bad misnomer.
Thank you. You have 2 minutes to answer this question. What does the current TEKS say about evolution and creationism? Do you agree with the current standards, and if not, how should they be changed?
I think the current standards are acceptable. They don't even address creationism. What they address Darwinism and say that all sides must be taught. I don't know that that's the best wording, but I think it's acceptable. We can relook at it again in 10 years and see if we can get them a little bit more broad to cover, you know, more of the different theories and to get more information. I think we'll have more information in 10 years, and we need to reevaluate it. Right now, we have a culture that is totally opposed to the concept of creation of anything. The Republican idea of creation of wealth has got to be squelched in order to get people to vote for government redistribution. If people think they can create something, they will. And if they don't think they can, they will depend upon the government. And I think that's why creationism is a big issue. I don't think it has anything to do with religion. It's getting that concept out of children's minds so that they will know better than to think about creating anything.
Thank you.
14.
Thank you. Number 14, you have 2 minutes to answer this question. 45 states have adopted the Common Core standards, which is set of the K-12 curriculum, standards developed by a group of national organizations and supported by the federal government. States who adopt Common Core are being granted waivers for meeting certain No Child Left Behind goals. States who do not adopt Common Core may be penalized with the loss of Title I federal money for low-income districts. Do you support adoption of the Common Core standards in Texas? If yes, why? If not, why not? And how would you address the consequences of non-adoption?
Well, I don't think we should adopt them. I think we need to take very strong, aggressive action to eliminate the U.S. Department of Education, and we need to stop sending so much money to Washington because we never get it back, and we get it back with strings compelling us to do things we don't necessarily want to do. One of the things I have not done yet and want to do is find out exactly what percentage of our school funding does come from the federal government. At one time, it was a very small amount, and we agreed to it, and we followed all their rules for chunk change. It may be a much more significant percentage right now, and that's the first thing to find out. And if it isn't, we need to really reevaluate how we spend our school dollars. I've been looking at some of the schools' report cards, and every one that I've seen shows about 50% of the funds that they receive goes to the classroom and 50% to administration. The Republican Party platform has a plank that says of all salary dollars, 80% should go directly to the classroom. That means to exclusively full-time classroom teachers, and 20% to administration. If we just implement that plank, it would solve all those problems. And we could probably forego with the federal funding.
Thank you. You have 1 minute to answer this question. Should all history and government courses be required to reinforce the factual differences between a pure democracy and a pure Republican form of government?
I don't think all social studies and history classes necessarily should. I don't think we need to beat it, you know, with a stick. It needs to be in the right courses, and it needs to be emphasized correctly. If we keep pounding it in relentlessly everywhere, someone's going to say, well, why? Why don't we just tell them the truth? We're at a break point. And the other thing is that in the next 4 or 5 years, we're going to see dramatic changes in this country. Either we're going to restore our founding principles and self-government, or we're going to become socialist. At which point, that's a moot question. So long-term, what goes into education needs to be the information that is going to have long-term value. They absolutely need to learn those things, but it doesn't need to be, too, extensive. But we need to put in information that is going to serve children whose future challenges we cannot anticipate. That means the broadest possible truth.
You have 2 minutes on this question, Gail. Are alternative sexual lifestyles such as homosexual, bisexual, and transgender included in the TEKS? If so, at what grade level and in what course subjects, for example, English, science, or social studies? Do you agree with the TEKS or TEKS on this issue?
To the best of my knowledge, that is not included in any of our TEKS at this point. The health standards are coming up in the next session, and that is probably where there will be a very strong effort to introduce those topics, and I do not think that's appropriate for a public school education. This is academic information. That it's not the job of the schools to do social engineering to make sure that our children agree with something or disagree with something. That's not their job. It's to educate children, to provide the facts. And if we teach them how to read well, if we teach them how to do mathematics, if we teach them how to do independent research, they will make wise decisions all by themselves. They already know how to think. Anyone who's ever had a relationship with a 5-year-old has been outsmarted by that 5-year-old. They just need more information to think with, and that is the job and the purpose of education.
Thank you. You have 2 minutes to answer this question. In traditional education, the teacher is the primary source of information and authority and disseminates knowledge. In constructivism, the teacher acts as facilitator, interacting with and assisting students to construct their own learning. Please state your philosophy on constructivism versus traditional education.
Well, I think traditional education is the ideal. I would challenge that definition a little bit, and that I don't think the teacher is necessarily the source of knowledge, but the person who disseminates it. The knowledge should be from books, from a wide variety of sources. And the teacher is the person who disseminates that information and ensures the children actually understand it. Constructivism is built on the principle that if a child creates it by himself, he'll understand it better. Well, there's some truth to that, but it took over 100 years to develop our basic writing system. And it was still in development. If we look at documents from the 17 and 1800s, spelling was still changing. It's still changing today. To say that, well, yeah, if they developed the writing system all by themselves, they would be better at it. But you can teach them how to write competently in a year. I think it's foolish. I think people are experimenting with our children. They don't know that that produces a better education for children. They might know that in the workspace, if they put a team together on a project, instead of one person telling everybody what to do, they might get a better product. Children don't know enough to be making those decisions yet. That's why they're children. And I see way too much assumptions that however adults are, well, we do the same thing with kids. Well, no. Children need authority, they want authority, and they do not have the information and the background with which to make those kind of decisions. They do not have the opportunity to excel in that constructivist model. They don't learn healthy competition, and that's bad. They need to learn healthy competition, and that means sometimes someone else does better, and you can take pride in your friend's success, even if you didn't succeed. That can't happen in constructivism. Sorry.
Thank you.
That's great.
That's the
Well, that was our last
Okay.
question, and we want to thank you, Gail, so much for spending time with us.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.